Blessings, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Dane, your host. I hope you're doing well wherever you may find yourselves. Today's video is my second in my little mini-series where I talk about my favorite album runs of all time. Today is number 19. Now, before we get into today's band or artist of choice, I forgot to mention one of the parameters of this series. To make the cut for these 20 favorite album runs of all time, you can't have less than 6 albums in said run. So having that out of the way, let me talk about this band. Before I give you the name of said band, this is one of those bands that is hard to put into any category, of whether it be rock or this, that, or the other. I will tell you they are very avant-garde. They're very experimental. This band has so many different textures to their music, so many different layers, so many different nuances, so many different idiosyncrasies, if you will, in a good way. There is this penchant for noise and yet quiet instrumentation, kind of a juxtaposition. And then another thing that this band has a penchant for is lots of repetition, and yet also the opposite, lots of surprises, lots of changes, not necessarily time signature changes, which there are, abound in this band, but there are also just changes in direction with respect to where the music's going in a particular song. A lot of epic tracks as well. So, and there is part of their discography, and in this album run, definitely there are 8 in this run. I should have mentioned that first, where the music is calm and relaxing. Meditative would be a better word. Contemplative or contemplative would be a better word, or just as good actually. But then it's also at times atonal and loud and disquiet and chaotic. Lots of discord, but in a good sense. I describe this band as both angelic and demonic at the same time, not in a literal sense, but with respect to trying to describe the music. Very difficult band to describe, not only what label or genre to put them in, but how to describe their music in general. I describe some of the, when I say that they're angelic and demonic, I mean that their music has a quality that I would describe as lovely abrasive, or an abrasive loveliness. So juxtaposition is the key to this band. They embrace both the beautiful and the grotesque, musically, lyrically, etc. I don't know if they're familiar with John Ruskin, the Victorian essayist, but like him, they seem to embrace the imperfect. They celebrate the imperfect, the human condition, and that kind of thing. This band contains both moments of clarity and moments of confusion. This band contains moments of transparency and moments of opaqueness with respect to lyrics and the music itself. There's a great level of self-awareness in this band, and yet at the same time, there's moments of uncertainty or unsureness, if that's a word. This band is all about lyrically and musically and sonically a search for meaning, a search for identity. It is both inquisitive and yet at the same time knowing. This band seems to embrace romanticism and at the same time embrace nihilism. I'm talking about the Swans, or I'm talking about Swans, no the. So let's start talking about this wonderful album run, which begins with The Great Annihilator. Some have said that this is their magnum opus. More on that later. Now, this came out in 1995 is a double vinyl album, and then on CD, just one CD. You'll see as we get through this run that there's a lot of double stuff, right? There's a lot of double or triple albums with respect to vinyl, and a lot of double, sometimes triple with the CDs. Now, so very passionate about making music. This band is, from such, a large discography and then such a wealth of music in each album. Now, their first 5 albums is also one of my favorite runs of all time, but it's only 5, so I left it out based on the parameters. Originally, I was like, gee, do I put the first run or the second run? But then I realized, well, they only have 5, so I definitely have to do this run. I'm still to this day, I'm not sure which album run I like more. But if you were to, do that psychological thing, as a therapist, you have to answer quickly. My gut would say it's as much as I love those first 5 albums. This is even more glorious. All right, so now talking about this album finally. This album is more upfront and obvious with respect to the melodies. Yet it still retains that avant-garde experimental dynamic that you know and love if you're a fan of Swans. You have light and shade in the band, in the music, and not in a Zeppelin or hair metal-y sense, or what you know about classic rock. That's not what we mean. All the things I said before about textures and whatnot, and the juxtaposition of ideas and romanticism and nihilism and that sort of thing. And you hear it in the music as well. Again, the quiet moments and then the abrasive noise stuff. So, and this album specifically has a lot of that. At times it is both manic, the music is, and at other times it's quiet. The mania, or rather the quiet, is the introspective instrumentation and softness, and the mania is the heaviness, the abrasive, iconic atonal stuff, if you will. But there's, as I said, there's melodies here, obvious melodies. The example of that description of what I just gave you is the song "I Am the Sun," which is one of my favorite songs by the band of all time. Top 5 for me. Here you have Michael Hira and Jarboe taking turns on vocals. It is just wonderful. The best way to describe this album is it's dark, it's cathartic, it's schizophrenic, like so much of their stuff, because of all the juxtapositions that they use to create their music. It's full of discord, it's full of dissonance, it's full of atonal splendor, is my words, what I would use to describe this album. Elements of abrasive goodness, I would also say. It's very in your face, it's very nihilistic, and yet realistic at the same time. Sense of wonder is what this album creates. Now, if we talk about songs that are the standout tracks for me, as I said, "I Am the Sun" is one of them. "She Lives," celebrity lifestyle, where they poke fun or talk about the seriousness of what it means to be, a celebrity and the lifestyle that you pick. Kind of die by the sword, live by the sword, die by the sword kind of a thing. "Blood Promise" is great, and then you get this suite called, it's one song, but it's got 2 titles to it, as they often do. 3 titles to it: "Mind, Body, Light, Sound." 4 titles, excuse me. "My Buried Child," "Alcohol, the Seed," "Killing for Company," "Mother's Milk," "Where Does the Body End?" And that's so important, that song, "Where Does the Body End?" because this is where you see the band really embracing and divulging their interest in the connection between the material and the spiritual, and how do you transcend from the material into the transcendent. And that's going to pop up on an album in this album run, which is so different from everything else I'm going to present to you today. But it's really a sticking point with the whole band in this 8 album run, not just that one album and not just the song here. So "Where Does the Body End?" ? The title track is my favorite here. This album also begins with a song called "In" and ends with a song called "Out," which are short 2+ minute songs, and they're quite good. I like them. This is a wonderful album. Many hail this as their magnum opus. There are days where I think that as well. All right, next is "Soundtracks for the Blind." This came out as a 4 LP set, if you can believe that, in 1996, and it came out as a 2 CD set. As you can see, I have the 2 CD set here. This album contains collages, or amalgamations is a better word, of samples, including sampling their previous work on their first 5 albums or so. So it's a it's an appreciation of the self, if you will. a love letter to the self, maybe. This album has loops. It has overdubs, like you wouldn't believe. The crossfades, what I call audio pyrotechnics. I don't know how I came up with that word, but that's what resonates with me verbiage-wise. Lots of overdubs. This is often cited by critics as their magnum opus, myself included. Maybe a tie with The Great Annihilator. Standout tracks here. Again, there's a lot here. Red Velvet Corridor. I Was a Prisoner in Your Skull. So, again, here's that dealing with the body, the connection between materialism and the spiritual, and the connection between mental and the physical, right? Living in someone else's head, rent-free kind of thing. Live Through Me, that is, that mentality again. Then you have Mellow Thumb. Volcano is wonderful. The Beautiful Days is wonderful. How They Suffer. Animus, the closing track to side 1, disc 1, 10 minutes, almost 11 minutes long, is great. Side 2, Red Velvet Wound, the sound, Her Mouth, Blood section C, dealing with the body again. I Love You This Much, Empathy, great song. Empathy is wonderful. And then the last, Sacrifice is wonderful. 10 minutes, almost 10 and a half minutes. It's called The Final Sacrifice, almost 10 and a half minutes, wonderful. And then it ends with Surrogate Drone, just about 2 minutes, just over 2 minutes. Wonderful way to end an album. Check this out if you're not familiar with this album by them. Again, hailed by many as their magnum opus. I may not give a definitive answer as to what I think is their magnum opus. It is somewhere in these 8 albums, and this next one, if you pull a gun to my head, and you have to do that answer real quick, it's this one. And I meant to say, never mind. That's not what I was going to say. I'm sorry, it's not the next one. Before we get to this one, the next album is 2010's My Father Will Guide Me Up a Rope to the Sky, 1 LP, 1 CD. So this is the shortest work in this 8-album run. And this is a total shift from these 2 wonderful albums. Because here is where Michael Hira is embracing spirituality more so than ever. And so it's a very spiritual album, full of spiritual themes. It's a short album compared to what came before, and what definitely comes later is much longer. So again, Hira's spirituality. He's embracing spirituality heavily at this time. And of course, things like that are going to reflect in a band of this caliber's work. It's a very atmospheric album. It's very ethereal, and it continues the motif of the band almost since its inception. It continues the motif of the band almost since its inception about body consciousness. Again, as we have on here and on here, dealing with the body. Right? The song again was Where Does the Body End? So one more time, it continues that motif of interest in the body, that body consciousness. And adding to that, the removal or transcending said consciousness, transcending the body, moving away from material things, right? Yoda, this crude matter, he says in Empire Strikes Back. There's thematically some similarities in the overall arc of this 8-album run because of that, and other things as well. So here are the notable tracks for me. No Words / No Thoughts, that's 1 track. You Effin' People May Make Me Sick, funny title, but it's a great song. Inside Madeline, good song. And Eden Prison. I like the whole album start to finish, but those are the best. I think there are 6 tracks, only 7. Those are the 4 best. And one of the things about this album is that Jarboe is not on the album. She's missing. She left the band at this point. She does make a return as guest on some of the stuff to follow. So that is 2010's My Father Will Guide Me Up a Rope to the Sky. I did not like this album at first, but boy, has it grown on me. So I had to definitely include it here. All right, so next, finally, if you had to put a gun to my head, this I would argue is their magnum opus. I'm talking about The Seer. And Michael Hira got the idea. There's a back tail of the Toto, creepy-looking Toto dog, right? A Yorkie or a terrier. Anyway, so Michael Hira got the idea of the song title, I think, if I remember correctly, did my brother-in-law tell me this because he's a big Swans fan? Anyway, because of, as they were laying down acoustic tracks originally before they went onto the vinyl, he said, this seems kind of prophetic, doesn't it? And so The Seer came to be born as the title. 2012, originally, a 2 CD set, but if you got it on vinyl, it was 3 LPs. This is a sonic masterpiece. It has drone and noise dynamics to it, or rather noise and drone experimentation here. They've done that before, but it's kind of back in full force here. This album is, show it to you again, the first part of what critics have called the vinyl trilogy, and the next 2 that follow. The title track is over 30 minutes, and it's wonderful. It's my favorite song on the album, like so many Swans records. A lot of times, not always, but a lot of times the title track, it ends up being my favorite. Now, while Swans sound nothing like Genesis, they do have in common with Genesis, they have a lot of long songs. Again, they don't sound like Genesis, but Supper's Ready is to Genesis what this song, The Seer, the title track, is to this band. That's how good it is. It's my favorite song of them of all time. And Hira has gone on record to say that this album is the culmination of every previous Swans album, including his side projects, including Angels of Light. Excuse me. What's interesting, because the album My Father Will Guide Me Up a Rope to the Sky has been hailed by critics as both once at the same time the culmination of all their work and the absence of all their work at the same time. That's a weird juxtaposition, but again, Swans is that mysterious juxtaposition type band that lends that mystery. Anyway, so Jarboe makes an appearance here, but despite the fact that she's not on the whole album, her replacement, Karen O, is just phenomenally wonderful. I love her voice. One critic has described the title track this year as a descent into hell, or was it a musical similarity to Dante's Inferno? No, actually, that's not it. Arthur Rimbaud's collection of poems called A Season in Hell. A critic, I can't remember the name, described this song as a descent. I'm sorry, that's what I described as. I'm getting to that. Sorry, a critic has described this as Swan's season in hell. So, regardless, it's a transcendent piece. For me, I describe this as. Now I lost my train of thought. I described this song as a descent into madness, and then you come out through the end, come out the other end with a sense of clarity, much like the Inferno, right? Regardless, it's transcendent. I would also describe that this song contains what I would call kenosis, and that's an emptying, a Hebrew word that means the emptying and to create. So the whole band here and the whole band seems to empty their heart, their mind, their soul, their whole spirit, their whole body into creating this work. And that's what's left behind, this masterpiece, right? For me, I forgot what I was going to say. What I was going to say is when I first listened, the second time that I listened to this is when the song really sank in. That usually happens second or third time. And that's what I felt, because I felt like I was being twisted and disassembled, and then I was reassembled somehow. So it put, the song seems, for me, again, I can't speak for others, it pulls me apart and then puts me back together. It's that transcendent. So that's how I came up with the word kenosis. So it's not a permanent, hey Bowie, it's not a permanent kenosis with respect to, I know I'm rambling here, the listener. And of course, it's not literal because the members of the band are still alive and that kind of thing. But it pulls me apart and puts me back together. So what I'm trying to say here is that the creators of this wonderful album empty themselves to create this wonderful piece of music, and in turn, in listening to it, that happens to us as well. We're like part of the creation because of the relationship between artist, and the art itself. So I've talked about that before, and I talk about that in my class, that three-way relationship between artist, and the art itself. This song, "The Seer," is a revelation. It's apocalyptic in a sense. It's climactic and anticlimactic at the same time. My words. And of course, here is it's prophetic, and I would agree with that. Other tracks, the opening track, "Lunacy," I was hooked from the beginning. What a great song. Then you get "The Seer Returns," which is the song that has Jarboe on it. It's wonderful. I can't remember if it's the beginning to this. I think it's the introduction song to, and then "The Seer." You could argue that it's really one song, but two separate tracks. Then you have the wonderful "A Peace in the Sky," and then you have the "Apostate," and on some albums it's called just "Apostate," depending on what version you get. So that is "The Seer" in a nutshell. What a great album. For me, again, if you put a gun to my head, this is their magnum opus. I just love it. I fell in love with it right now on the get-go, but I needed a second listen for, to listen to more textures and with the headphones kind of thing. I often do that. I'll listen to it without headphones, and I'll listen to it a second time with headphones. All right. And then I go from there. That was 2012. Next is 2014. This is a horrible album cover, "To Be Kind." And in the back, you have the baby making, I'm not sure what that expression is, kind of the hesitation kind of move. Anyway, this album, I don't want to say it has blues in it, but it has a blues-like feel to it in some parts. A friend of mine went and saw them live on their last tour for their most recent album, which I have here, which I'll talk about last, because it's the last in the run. And he said that Hira sounded like he just wants to be a blues musician. And I get that. Sometimes is that acoustically driven bluesy stuff, but it's not blues. It's experimental blues, pastiche kind of thing, I guess is how to describe it. There's some industrial stuff here, kind of harking back to their days with the Filth and the Cop, the first 5 album run kind of stuff. This is an album that is a journey of self-expression, but hey, aren't all their albums, especially this 8 album run, that as well? This album I describe as showcasing the necessity of overindulgence. It's bold. It's very brazen, but in a good way. It's overindulgent in a good way. It's endearing and it's exhausting. It leaves you breathless. This album is breathtaking. In other words, my words. And it's positively breathtaking, sonically breathtaking. Here are the standout tracks for me: "Screenshot," "Just a Little Boy," "Bring the Sun" / "Toussaint Louverture." This is an interesting song because part of the second part of that song, "Toussaint Louverture," is Hira just belting out over and over again, with the music accompanying, of course. Toussaint Louverture! It's quirky, it's funny, and yet great at the same time. Next is "She Loves Us," great song. And then the song "Oxygen," which is something that could have been on albums ago, and they decided to put it here. They're saving it, reworking it, that kind of thing. And the title track, my favorite on here. Wonderful, wonderful song. Let's see if they have the length of... I hate when that happens. So, I don't know if the length is on here, but I'll give it a gander. Let's see. Oxygen is 8:11. To Be Kind is 8 minutes and 23 seconds. Okay, so no. All right. So that is "To Be Kind," a breathtaking album. And we'll put this over here. All right, so that was 2014, 2 CD set, 3 LP. Next is 2016's The Glowing Man. This came out on vinyl as 3 LP set, 2 CD set. This, of course, like what I've been talking about, is experimental and avant-garde, of course. It's philosophical, of course. It's cerebral, of course. But even more pensive and introspective than I think some of their other stuff. And that's a bold statement. It's very thought-provoking. And again, all of their stuff is. The title track is a marvel. There's a certain aura about the song that I can't put into words, but it leaves you wanting more. And that's saying much, considering that it's almost 30 minutes, or it's almost 30 minutes, or it's almost 29 minutes long. How many songs can you think of that are that long and it leaves you wanting more? Then you have the song Finally Peace, which we can relate to. You can interpret that 2 or 3 ways, which I won't get into. And now if you have the vinyl version of this on 3LP, you have 3 songs that make up a suite called The Cloud of Forgetting and then The Cloud of Unknowing Parts 1 and 2. But on the CD, it's just Cloud of Forgetting and Cloud of Unknowing. Notice the verbiage there. Forgetting and unknowing. They like to play with words as well. As one is, forgetting is, it's not quite a juxtaposition here, but forgetting is you didn't intend to forget, but unknowing is you did it on purpose. You're forgetting on purpose. So it's a very interesting introspective track. Take a look at it. Take a listen to it if you haven't heard it. Then another standout track is The World Looks Red/Black. And if memory serves, don't quote me on this, this harkens back, the idea for the song harkens back to when Thurston Moore of Sonic Youth was in the band. Back to, their first album or what have you, Filth, I believe. This track is almost 14 and a half minutes. It's wonderful. Perhaps the most thought-provoking piece on the album. All right. Next is Leaving Meaning. 2019, 2 LP, 2 CD. There's some Mellotron here. That's Dynamite by Larry Mullins. There's some wonderful steel guitar here as well. He has some interesting, in a good way, curious background vocals. Now, it's not as great as the previous albums that I mentioned. I do like it more than the spiritual album that I mentioned. But regardless, I do like this album. Here are the best tracks on this album. All right, let me repeat something. I may have said the wrong thing. I like Leaving Meaning, this album, better than, My Father Giving Me a Rope Up to the Sky, or whatever the album title's called. But this isn't as good as The Seer or the other ones that I mentioned. That doesn't include, My Father Giving Me a Rope to Come Up to the Sky. But it's still a very good album. It's not a great album, but it's still very good. Here are the best tracks. The Hanging Man, the title track, Leaving Meaning, Sunfucker, Cathedrals of Heaven. This is another spiritual song. Could probably fit it on that spiritual album. It's Coming, It's Real, is Dynamite, and some New Things. Those are 6 tracks that I just love about this album. The whole album, I think, is very good. But those are the ones that are stand out for me. Again, this is an album that's hard to describe. Go figure. The whole band is hard to describe. I'm doing my best to do that for you today. Next is their most recent release, and I have lots to say about this one because I've been listening to this one a lot. I love this album. This may eventually become my favorite. This may, for me, become their magnum opus. Called The Beggar, 2 LP, 2023, 2 CD sets, about a year and a half old, I guess, give or take. There are some drone-like moments. Go figure. It's Swans, right? It's a dark album, very dark album. Some of the same motifs. You have, the body issue because you have the lungs, the heart, the liver. So make of that what you will. You have lots of motifs. You have lots of repetition. You have the expected vocal phrasing and cadences from Hero that you know and love. Sorry about that, folks. It's more enigmatic than Leaving Meaning and rivals that of The Seer and The Glowing Man and To Be Kind. The lyrics are introspective. The lyrics are very pensive. Themes of life and death. And I think part of that has to do with, at this time, I don't know how he's doing now, but at this time, supposedly Michael Hero was very ill. But then he went out on tour, and again, my brother-in-law saw him in Paris. So I think he's doing better. If you know how he's doing, I'd love to hear that. So you have themes of life and death in this album. Again, this album one day could be their magnum opus for me personally. And because of the themes of life and death, it's very Hamlet-like, because almost right from the get-go, you have a song, maybe it's the second or third, well, not right from the get-go, but close to the beginning of the album, you have a song called Michael is Done, and we can interpret that a couple ways. And so it's Hamlet-like in the sense that in the play Hamlet's constantly thinking about his mortality. And that album has this. It's quiet. It's got lightness to it. It's got shade and darkness thematically. It's avant-garde Gothic to me. I'm not sure what I mean by that, but that's what I wrote down. It's avant-garde, of course, but I know what I mean. It's got a Gothicness to it because it's so dark. Not a Gothic in a literal sense, because his voice is more deeper than normal in some ways. Or maybe it's just my imagination I'm projecting, because maybe he's projecting. It's a complicated piece of work, this album is. Anyway, this album essentially is extremely intense, and that's what makes it so wonderful. Songs the notable songs here: Paradise Is Mine, Michael Is Done. Again, he's dealing with his illness. Again, I'm not sure if his illness is terminal or was, and he's doing better or rebounded. I'm not sure. Again, if you know, post in the comments. I'd love to hear how he's doing. The title track, The Beggar, 10 minutes and 15 seconds. Then you get No More of This, which is, of all their pieces, perhaps the most nihilistic of their pieces. And again, it goes with the struggle that Heer is having personally with his health. Again, tied to that is the song Ebbing. And then you have, I have to look this up because I just abbreviated for some reason. Let's get it out. Yeah, here's the song. It's a long title. Why Can't I Have What I Want Anytime That I Want? Yeah, we can relate to that. So, and then you get the magnum opus song. Well, I'm sorry. Then you get the best song on the album. One of my favorite songs now. This is 43 minutes and 51 seconds. It's called The Beggar Lover. And in parentheses, There. Oh my God, I don't know how to describe this song because it's so rich and so full of different features and elements and textures, and it's all the things that I said at the beginning of the video and throughout the video about, juxtapositions and going off in a different direction to surprise you when you least expect it, or even if you do expect it, it still surprises you. It's got some repetition. It's got the wonderful phrasing of Heer's deep Gothic vocals here. It's very resonant. It's abrasive at times. It's quiet and it's got that quiet instrumentation at times. It's a wonder. It's a marvel. It's fantastic. It's one of my top favorite songs. I think top 10, top 15, and maybe even one day my top favorite. It may even surpass The Seer one day. I'm in love with this song. I love this song. What a great album. And then the final track of note is The Memorious. This album is haunting. It's disturbing. It's quiet, dare I say, apoplectic at times. It's moody. It's cathartic. It's dark. It's inquisitive. It's inviting. It has that kenosis quality, again, that the band, especially Michael, because what he's dealing with is emptying the self. He's pouring his heart out. He's pouring his body. He's pouring all parts of his body, his soul, his mind, every part of his being out to create this masterpiece. This album is a masterpiece. Again, he's pouring out his heart and soul and his spirit into this piece of art. He's wearing his heart on his sleeve here. He's inviting us to sympathize with him. This is an oral memoir, if you will. It's a meditation, perhaps John Donne-like, and perhaps suggests a sense of renewal. It's definitely cathartic. So that emptying of the self to create art. Emptying of the self to create art. Thank you so much for watching. I knew this was going to be a long video. One of my favorite bands of all time. Stay tuned if you like for my next favorite album run, number 18. Take care now. Bye. God bless.